Hey guys, it's Sherilyn. Welcome back to my channel, and for today's video, I'm going to be doing my first storytime-esque video. Many of you may or may not know, but I do dog walking for the service WAG. If you don't know, WAG is basically like the Uber for dog walking. You can get on-demand walks, etc. Sitting, boarding, things like that. Ugh, feels weird to make this video. It's like my heart's pounding, like it's weird to talk about. I feel like I'm making it sound more intense than it actually is. But basically, for today's WAG Walker story, I'm going to be talking about my personal horror story, I guess is what you'd call it. I'm trying to wrestle what to call it, but yeah, it was just, the worst WAG walk I've had, and I want to talk about it and go over what happened with WAG support and everything, so if anybody has any experiences similar to this, they kind of know what to expect, and yeah, so this is my experience. An essential message for this video is going to be go with your gut, because if I had gone with my gut, I wouldn't have walked these dogs in the first place. So I have about 340 walks under my belt with WAG. I've never really had any negative experiences. I've had like 2 or 3 dogs that I've walked that have been a little overly aggressive. They'll bite the leash for me and I'll play tug of war with them, and you know, it sounds fun in retrospect, but it's really, when it's a big dog and they're just kind of overpowering you, it's not good. Those are the only kind of aggressive experiences I've had with walking, but whenever that happens, I just don't walk the dog again. For this particular client, I suppose, I had walked them, it's a pair of dogs, I had walked them probably, I don't know, 10-15 times in the past 6 months. So the dogs were a Golden Retriever and a Rottweiler. The Rottweiler was more of a puppy and the Golden Retriever was, I think, about 6 years old. Basically, whenever I'd walk these dogs, whenever we would encounter any other... Someone is banging on the walls outside my apartment complex. Anyway, whenever I would walk these 2 dogs, whenever they would see another dog across the street or anywhere, they would get pretty aggressive, you know, they would start tugging on the leash really hardcore. I would do my best to get them to sit down, distract them, stand in front of them, all the necessary things you would do to get them to not be aggressive towards dogs. The other tactic I would use is I would always make sure I was across the street or somewhere, you know, far away. I would never, if there was dogs coming at me, I would find a way to divert and make sure we were nowhere near the dogs. And I had a couple situations with these dogs where I felt like they were close to overpowering me, too aggressive, made me really uncomfortable, but usually the walks are an hour and it's 2 dogs, so you get extra pay, and it just, you know, it was hard for me to say no to it a lot of the times, and I think because other walkers had similar experiences, this walk would commonly sit on the app and go up in price, which would incentivize me to want to take the walk more, and I would end up taking it a lot. So particularly for this day, I was actually, this is where the go with your gut thing comes into play. I'd actually thought to myself probably a couple times before I took this walk on this particular day that I shouldn't walk these dogs anymore, because they were just increasingly making me uncomfortable, and I was just afraid a bad situation was gonna happen, but I kept taking the walks anyway. So on this day that I decided to take the walk, the first thing, typically people are still banging on the freaking wall. Okay, so typically when I walk these dogs, I take a certain path where most of the walk is going on like a 4-lane street, so there's dogs on the other side of the road, they're pretty far away, and if dogs are coming at us, I can typically quickly go into an apartment complex somewhere on the side of the road and divert their attention away. Hi, Misty. For this day, for the first time in 15 or so walks, I decided to take a different route because I was just feeling like that day, and I had never done it before with these dogs. So I was walking these dogs, and they had seen a couple of other dogs walk by, and they had gotten pretty riled up to the point where I was getting uncomfortable, but you know, nothing serious was happening, but they were definitely already pre-riled up. I don't know the best word to describe it for some reason, but they were definitely, by the time the incident happened, they were more aggressive than they were 20 minutes prior, if that makes sense. For some reason, I'm having a hard time figuring out what to say, but I think you get what I'm saying. Essentially, what comes down to when the incident, or essentially the attack, happens. So I'm walking both dogs across like a 2-lane, just a regular 2-lane street, and I see this couple with this little white Chihuahua walking ahead of us on the street. So immediately, I think this is probably the third encounter with like a dog that we had seen throughout the first 20 minutes. This is only 20 minutes into the walk. So I immediately take the 2 dogs and I take them across the street. There were no cars, hoping that would be good enough, you know, because it had worked the last couple of instances. We were on the other side of the street. I have both dogs. The golden retriever has a choke chain on him, and the Rottweiler I believe he just had his Wonder Walker harness on that day. So we are across the street. The 2 dogs I am walking see the Chihuahua across the street, and they just go absolutely insane. Like, it's hard for me to recall what exactly happened, but essentially they started both spinning around me in circles, and I at some point lost grip of the golden retriever's leash. I don't know how, but it happened. I'm assuming it's just when they were tying me around and I was trying to get a hold of them. He overpowered me and ripped out of my hands. It's hard for me to remember. The next thing I remember is basically just me on the pavement looking to my right and seeing the dog look at me with the leash on the ground, and I lunged for the leash, and the dog, while I lunged, he darted across the street and basically pummeled right into the Chihuahua. So immediately I take hold of the Rottweiler and I dart across the street. Again, there were no cars. The dog could have even gotten hit by a car, but instead he attacked a Chihuahua. So the boyfriend or the husband or whoever picks up the Chihuahua immediately and, you know, starts walking as far away as he can from the golden retriever. I run over, immediately grab the dog, and I just start hysterically apologizing to the owner of the Chihuahua. And luckily she is so understanding that these dogs are not mine. And I'm kind of saying that I don't even think they should be on the street or on this app anymore. There you go. And I'm just so grateful that she was so understanding. So I immediately start to text the owner of the 2 dogs to tell them what happened. Basically, I'm having a conversation with the owner of the Chihuahua while I'm not only texting WAG support. Actually, it took me a while to text WAG support because it was more important for me to text the owner and let him know what was happening. So I immediately sent him a text. I gave the phone number to the owner of the Chihuahua. I let her know about WAG's insurance and how it should cover anything. But at that point, we didn't think anything was wrong with her dog. So she gets all the information she needs, I get all the information I need, apologize, etc. And I make sure I have handle of both dogs, and she walks way back to her dog. She comes back after she goes and sees her boyfriend, husband, or whoever with the dog and says, hey, my dog isn't walking. She's clearly hurt, so I try to get in contact with the owner again and tell him what happened, and her boyfriend calls her over again, and she walks over and she comes back over to me again, and she's like, hey, I just sent you a picture. And at this point I'm on the phone with the owner of the dogs that I'm walking, and he's like, you know, he's doing everything that he can. You know, his dog basically just attacked another dog on the street, and I'm sure he's aware of his dog's aggression problems because he was like, was his choke collar on? Yes. What happened? I described him the situation. Told me to take the dog straight home. I did. And then while I was on the phone with him, you know, I told him about the dog's cut on his... Oh, yeah, so I forgot to say. So the girl comes back and says, hey, I sent you a picture. And I look at the picture, and the poor little Chihuahua has, like, probably like a 1-inch cut on his stomach. Open, bleeding. And I just feel... Oh, my God. I just feel so horrible. It's still hard for me not to feel horrible because I know this wasn't, like, 100% my fault or anything, but it's really hard not to take the blame for it. Anyway, she walks away with her dog. I keep apologizing. I just don't know what else to do. At this point, I started texting WAG support, and I figured out later that I probably should have called WAG's emergency line as opposed to texting support and waiting for them to respond. But my thought process in that moment, and I still kind of think now it's still what I would do, since there was nothing actively wrong with the dogs, like none of the dogs I was walking got hurt, that contacting emergency support wouldn't be helpful in that moment. But when I posted about the situation on the WAG Walker Facebook group, which if you're a WAG Walker and you're not a part of that, I highly suggest joining it because it's just a really great community to share your stories about what happened, to ask questions. It took me literally 7 months of walking till I found this group, and I'm like, my whole life is basically changed with it, and it just made me feel better, especially when the situation happened. I was able to post about it and like talk to people about it. It made me feel a lot better about not feeling super guilty. WAG support knows, the owner knows. I'm assuming the couple is taking their Chihuahua to the vet to get fixed. So what happens is I take the dogs straight home, say goodbye to them for the last time because there's obviously no way I'll ever walk them. It's just so sad because I'm obviously not going to walk them again. I eventually drive home after this. WAG support still hasn't gotten back to me, and I never called WAG emergency or anything. I figured if the owner was in the know that, you know, we were okay, and he would contact WAG when it came to insurance and everything. So I get home and I immediately send an extremely long apology to both the owner of the Chihuahua and the owner of the dogs I walked. I just felt that it was necessary for me professionally and personally to make me feel better and to just look good on me because, you know, clearly I did the best that I could in the situation, and regardless, it still was me who was walking them, so I do have to take some responsibility for the situation. So again, I actually never received a response from the girl with the Chihuahua. I'm assuming that the Chihuahua got stitched up and he was fine, but I never heard anything back from her, and I also never heard back from the owner once I gave the owner. The owner of the 2 dogs I was walking just asked for WAG support numbers, and I gave those to him. So I think it was about 4 or 5 days later. Again, I'd never heard from WAG, which I thought was interesting because the situation was, in my opinion, the situation was pretty serious. Obviously, a dog got attacked. So I get a call from WAG support probably 5 days later, and he just asked me to it's the WAG response team, and he just asked me to go over the situation exactly, and I did, you know, exactly what happened, what I did, and he was like, okay, well, I will see if there's any more action. I've got your story, and yeah, you're fine for now. So I still go about my dog walking and everything for probably the next 2 weeks, and I get a call from the WAG response team again, and he basically asked me, hey, have you talked to anyone about your story yet? And I'm kind of confused because I was like, yeah, talked to a guy about 2 weeks ago. I just gave him the whole rundown of my story. The guy's like, okay, do you know who you talked to? Was it a male? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it could have been you. It was a guy that took my story. And he's like, okay. So I kind of gave him the story a little bit over again. He's like, okay. Well, I do need to let you know that because this is an open investigation, we have to investigate not only your WAG walker profile, but also the owner's profile, and go from there. So at this time, your account's going to be suspended. This was already a fear of mine when this whole situation happened. So immediately I'm like, oh great, I'm going to lose my WAG account. So I'm just like, okay. I had like literally 10 walks on my account at that point that were actively booked, and I was like, so do I not get to do any of these walks? And he goes, no, I'm gonna have to get them all covered for you. You know, I'm sorry, but you being really good in this situation will definitely help in the investigation, which I thought was whatever. I cooperated, and I just said, you know, I totally understand you have to suspend my account. It's just a bummer that I'm losing out on that income. And he's like, yeah, no worries, it's okay. We'll just have to investigate, and it should take no more than a week. I'm just like, okay. I had read a lot of stories on the Facebook group and even on like Reddit pages. Basically, whenever anything serious like this happens with your WAG account, almost all the time WAG will kick you off the app because probably, I would guess, because you're a liability. But at this point, I was pretty afraid that my WAG account was going to be gone. But luckily, a week goes by, and I feel like I should have more of an informative call, but I just get a call from a random guy that says, hey, your account is off suspension. Have a good day. I'm just like, okay, great. They never gave me a rundown of the situation. They never told me if the owner's account was removed. Yeah, that was literally all the information I got. And also, while I was suspended from the app, though my notification settings were off, I still got walk notifications, I still got texts, and really bummed me out when all my favorite clients got their walks booked and I just had to sit there and let them get taken. But I still have my WAG account, and I'm so happy. And to really summarize this story, just go with your gut. If you ever feel like a dog is too aggressive or you're going to be overpowered by a dog, don't be afraid to get that walk covered. Don't be afraid to just opt out of the walk, because you don't have to compromise your safety and your mental well-being really for a $12 walk. You just don't have to do that. So don't be afraid, go with your gut. I guess take from my situation that WAG may not always just cancel your account if something like this happens. Yeah, it was pretty scary and pretty traumatizing actually. So I'm a lot more careful at what dogs that I walk, and if I even see a note in, because unfortunately for WAG you can only see the walk notes after you book it, which I guess I can see why you would need to do that, but for us walkers it's pretty frustrating. So if I book a walk and I look in the walk notes from people and they say the dog is aggressive, he pulls hard, or he's just huge and a huge tugger, most of the time I will just go ahead and get that walk covered because I'm not going to compromise my own safety. I'm 110 pounds. Like, a lot of dogs that I walk weigh more than me. I'm just not going to do it. And yeah, don't be afraid that WAG's going to penalize you for getting it covered. I know it looks scary when you try to cover walks on your app and they make it seem like you will get kicked off if you request more than a couple covers. But again, don't compromise your safety. Don't let WAG scare you into accepting a walk that you're not comfortable with. Anyway, I hope you learned from my story. If you guys have any questions or, any suggestions on what I could have done better, I would love to hear your thoughts. I was just surprised in myself that I stayed pretty calm throughout the entire thing when it was such a just purely awful situation. So yeah, I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.